Stumps and Stories podcast with Nishad Pai Vaidya.
Welcome to a new episode of Stumps and Stories. And today I have someone who has had a very, very unique view of Indian cricket. I call him one of the OGs. This is because, before sports industry or being in the sports industry was cool for my generation or the generation after mine, he was already there. He was essentially one of the pioneers of the sports industry in India. He was there before it became cool. And let me give you a brief background of this gentleman. Now, if I go on to talk about everything he's done, it's going to take a really long time. So it's going to be really brief. Back in 1992, he was the manager of the Indian cricket team on a really tough tour to South Africa. And I say tough, not just in the cricketing sense, but because it was historic. It was the first time that India had landed in the Rainbow Nation. Diplomatically, the tour had to be a really big success, considering the history and everything that was going around at the time. He then went on to be a part of the organizing committee of the 1996 Cricket World Cup. And his journey with the Indian cricketing system just continued. It also went on to him becoming a manager again on the 2002 tour to England, where we all remember how India won the NatWest series and the Leeds test match. Later, he was also the media manager when India toured Pakistan in 2004, another high stakes tour. And then when Delhi Daredevils came into existence, as Delhi Capitals is known now, Delhi Daredevils in 2008 appointed him as the chief operating officer. And that association with cricket has continued. And for me personally, I must say that I'm really grateful to Mr. Amrit Mathur, because he also played a role in me getting my first gig with the BCCI. And that is one thing that I will never forget. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our guest on this podcast, Amrit sir. A very warm welcome and thank you so much for doing this. And I must say that you've had a pitchside view of Indian cricket.
Well, thank you very much for having me on the show and for all the kind words you said. I just think I was lucky to be where I was. It happened by chance, and it was actually a privilege to be associated so closely with cricket for such a long time. And I've had a look at players, matches, events, BCCI, IPL, as you said, very closely. And it's been great.
And you say you are very lucky, but luck can only give you the opportunity, but you managed to do good work, which is why you stayed on. And I think all our readers must pick up a copy of this book, Pitchside. And because possibly the greatest opening batter the world has ever seen has given a bit of a recommendation. Now, that's not for someone who's lucky. That's for someone who's done real good work. Amrit is a real all-rounder as an administrator. He brings that flair to his writing about his experiences in this must-read book. He says about the book, but he calls you an all-rounder as an administrator. Now, this all started when you were in the railways, and you happened to meet Mr. Madhav Rao Sindhya, who was at the time one of the ministers and also the BCCI president, and you stumbled into cricket administration. As a man in his 30s, is that something that you ever imagined, or it just happened by chance? And did you feel overwhelmed at any time that, hang on, what's happening?
Well, it happened totally by chance. Mr. Sindhya was my railway minister. I was working with him. I got to know him playing some social cricket, and he appointed me Secretary Railway Sports. Now, Railways is the biggest player in Indian sport. We have about 40 national teams, 100 internationals at any given time. So I was put into a position which was much beyond my position in hierarchy in the railways. Normally, this job went to somebody 10, 15 years senior. But I was appointed by him because he saw something in me and he trusted me. And that immediately put me on the BCCI and every other national federation, hockey, football, volleyball, basketball, you name it. So I just got a chance to get involved in the administration. It did overwhelm me because I already had a deep interest in sport. I had lots of friends who were playing active cricket, who were playing for India and things. So I was familiar with cricket, players and things. So not overwhelming, but I was just suddenly put into a position. I think I was the youngest member of BCCI at that time. And but I enjoyed seeing how the board functioned at close quarters. It was a privilege to attend working committee meeting or an annual general body meeting where you had stalwarts. You had Mr. Sindhya, you had Mr. Salve, you had Mr. Rasing Dungarpur, you had Mr. Chidambaram, you had Falasing Rao Gaikwad, Mr. P.M. Roongta, Mr. Kanmadikar, real stalwarts of Indian cricket administration. So it was quite a learning process. But everything got fast-tracked with me because Mr. Sindhya was my railway minister, and he also became president BCCI very soon. So because of my association with him, I just got fast-tracked into, I think, serious cricket administration.
And just a bit of context for our viewers. So earlier, what used to happen with the Indian teams is that the coach, manager, everyone, used to be all rolled into one. Like a former player used to become a manager. Like, for example, in 1971, Keki Tarapur went to West Indies, Hemu Adhikari went to England, and P.R. Mansingh, who had played cricket at the first class level, managed the 83 and 87 World Cup teams. Bapu Nadkarni was the manager. I think 85, Prasanna was the manager of the Indian team. Manager and coach.
Mr. Umrikar has been manager also. Mr. Raj
Yes.
Singh, he has managed teams in the past, yeah.
But in 92, and I had the privilege of talking to Mr. Ajit Wadekar, and God bless his soul. When I met him, he told me in 92, the BCCI decided, let's have a coach, and he was given that responsibility. But then the team was traveling to South Africa, and you were handpicked to be the manager of that team. Now, this is the role of being the administrative manager. Now, it's the first time the Indian team is having a coach per se. And all the administrative duties fall on your shoulders. You're in your early 30s. This is the tour to South Africa, the friendship series, because India had welcomed South Africa the previous year into international cricket. Now you're heading there, the first team to tour South Africa after readmission. Indian passport said that passport is valid, not valid in South Africa. What was that like? How was that challenge at the outset?
Well, it was a special tour, as you mentioned, because it was not a normal cricket tour for various reasons. Look at it from our perspective. As you mentioned, we did not recognize South Africa as a country. No diplomatic relations, nobody allowed to travel, no contact whatsoever. So there's a political context from our end regarding South Africa. Look at it from South Africa's point of view. They were isolated because of the policies of apartheid for many years. They just got back into international cricket, visited India for a short tour. And we were the first team to go back and tour South Africa. So for them also, it was a major moment in the sporting journey. And there was political turbulence in South Africa. Officially, there was still apartheid, still de Klerk was the president. Mandela had just been released from jail. So it was actually a political minefield as far as South Africa was concerned. And for us, it was a journey into the dark because, as I said, politically, and we had no contact at all with South Africa. Secondly, we knew nothing about South Africa from a cricket perspective. Nobody had been there, no information about players, pitches, conditions, their level of cricket, about anything. I think only Ravi had played with some of the South African cricketers in county cricket, I think when he was playing for Glamorgan. Otherwise, we knew nothing. So we went there totally blind, so to say. And strangely, before the tour, there was no preparation. There was no camp. There was no combined practice. We just landed in Bombay, collected, met, and boarded a flight off. And so much so that normally when you go on tour, there are various things which are mutually agreed between the two countries. Playing conditions, commercial arrangements, what kind of social events to attend, various other things. This time the playing conditions weren't even signed. So I was just told, jaake dekh lena, have a chat with Ali and sort it out. So the point I'm making is we were unprepared. We didn't know anything and we just went. And as you mentioned, our tour party consisted of 17. 14 players, Ajit as coach, Dr. Ali Irani is one person, physio, trainer, to do everything else, and me. So as a result, on a tour, Ali and I would help out with fielding drills. We do high catches, because there's nobody else. Now you have a support staff of almost 20 accompanying a team.
Yeah.
So earlier the manager had to do everything. Now whatever the manager did earlier is done by a specialist. So as a result, the manager has very little to do now, almost nothing. Because whether it's finance, whether it's the cricket side, whether it's the travel, whether it's the social engagement, whether it's the media, there is a specialist person to handle that. So the manager has practically nothing to do. So things have changed. And it was, as I said, uh, just going there and navigating your way through the cricket, through the non-cricket side. So that was a challenge. But I think greatly assisted by help from Ali Baka, the MD and chairman of, not he was, I think he was MD or CEO of South African cricket. He was very helpful. So not only the cricket side, or the administrative side, even on the political side, he would guide me. This is okay, this is not okay. Be careful of this. So I think ultimately it all worked out.
And apart from the cricketing angle, like I found some things really interesting in your book. Like, you had to prepare for a speech. I think it was at one of the diplomatic missions. And because obviously Mr. Wadekar said, nahi, nahi, aap dekhna. Azharuddin, the captain, he also said, nahi, aap dekhna. So the responsibility fell on your shoulders. You had to address the crowd.
You're right. As a manager, I knew that you have. The thing is, on a tour, the manager is the leader of the delegation. In terms of protocol, he comes ahead of the captain or the coach because he represents BCCI and indirectly represents India on tour. I found it a bit strange that here I am, young, inexperienced manager on a tour like this, and he has stalwarts like, say, Azhar, Kapil Dev, Ravi Shastri. They were the seniors in the team. So in protocol, I'm ahead of them. Similarly, there's Ajit Wadekar, he's captain of India, who's, acclaimed captain, who's won series abroad, but that's how it is. And so the manager has responsibility of responding, representing the team. And as you mentioned, on this occasion, when we landed at Durban, there was this public reception in the mayor's town hall or something, 500 guests live on television, and you're supposed to make a speech on behalf of the team. So I'm not used to this. I'm, just a young junior officer new to the BCCI, but I think I coped. I prepared, and then I got used to it. And that was one thing on this tour which was different from other tours, that the number of social engagements or other commitments you had because of the circumstance of the tour. India and South Africa, first time ever for South Africa after a long time to have a tour like this. So it was more challenging than a regular tour. And here I was, inexperienced in the deep end. But it went off okay, I think.
And you also had advisors, like, you said Dr. Ali Baka, who also had played for South Africa in their last test series in 1970, was their captain, and he guided you through that. You had the backing of Mr. Madhavrao Sindhya. How was it working with them? Because they seem to make things happen, because even the 1991 tour, when South Africa made a comeback into international cricket with the ODIs at Kolkata, Gwalior and Delhi, Mr. Sindhya was instrumental in that happening. So action-oriented administrators, what was it like working with them?
Well, Mr. Sindhya was very progressive, and he was also non-interfering when it came to the tour. He sort of realized that you need a manager. He thought I have the right man, and he left it to me. I don't think I repeatedly was in touch with him during the tour for instruction or anything. He just let me be and left it to my judgment and sense to go through that tour. But Dr. Ali Baka was totally different. He was seasoned, mature. He, as you mentioned, captain of South Africa, a long-term administrator, very hands-on. He knew everything that is to be known about cricket. Fortunately, when the South Africans had come to India for the short tour, I was involved in the various discussions and preparation of that tour and also the tour of the Indian team to South Africa. So there was a familiarity with Ali, a friendship and a rapport, and also others around Ali. There was Krish Makardouche, who was technically the president of South African cricket, whereas Ali was the main hands-on operational CEO. So that sort of rapport helped in terms of day-to-day working. You on a tour like that, you keep needing something from the host, whether it's to change your travel arrangements, a hotel, you need net bowlers, you need maybe a different kind of food at the ground. you might need a doctor on an emergency. So you're in constant touch with the South African Cricket Board. So that was a great help because whatever we needed was immediately forthcoming from the other side.
And you said there was a lot of advice, and diplomatically, the tour had to be spot on.
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela, the great man, was around. He had been released from prison just a year or two before that. And South Africa were heading towards a change, and the elections were still a while away because they happened in 1994.
Yeah.
So, what was that like? Meeting someone like a Nelson Mandela who had become an international figure. That was the one side. And then even de Klerk wanted to come and meet the team, but it could have been a public relations disaster seeing, him greeting the team in public. So, how did you handle all that?
That was a tightrope you had to walk. That we have traditional historic relations with South Africa because of Mahatma Gandhi, his work there, and his association, his legacy being continued through Mandela, etc. So obviously, politically, you're on that side, and you're not on the side of the apartheid regime and the de Klerk government. So you had to balance that out. So as soon as we went to South Africa, we sought an appointment with Mr. Mandela, which was immediately granted. The team went to meet him, and it was fantastic to be in the presence of a person, like him. He was gracious, he was kind, and you got that feel that here is a man who's completely special. And he was very kind to us. He met us, spent time. Then he even came to the ground to watch. I think twice he came to watch cricket and showed a lot of interest in meeting the players. And so I think it was a blessing to be in his presence for a short while.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think he also was one of the first people or one of the first world leaders to say that sport has the power to change the world, and lived up to it in the years ahead. When
in fact, that was the that was the philosophy the South African board was working on. That we've come through this political situation. We're coming out of it. So the South African Cricket Board sort of saw this opportunity of uniting society, which was fractured through cricket. So they made a conscious effort to reach out to the underprivileged, the non-whites, give them opportunities, get them included in cricket. And cricket, I think, became the first sport to become inclusive and to integrate different sections and to work together. So that was the lead taken by Ali Bakar and the board, following the policy and the pronouncements of Mr. Mandela. So in a way, the tour was implementing what was being discussed and desired politically and socially at that time.
And I would like to ask you this, on the technical side as well, there was history. Because when the playing conditions were discussed, Ravi Shastri joined you in that discussion, and there was a googly waiting for you. And it was about the third umpire referrals, and they also wanted a substitute umpire who could come on to the field as well.
I must say that you read the book very, very closely, very carefully, because these are details which would escape a casual reader. But so well done. I'm very happy that you read the book in so much detail.
I love reading, and as you know that it's for the game that I read, and it's this collection. This is just a part of my collection, and there's one more level here where your book sits very proudly, I must say. So, and there is more here as well. So, but I must ask you that because Sachin Tendulkar became the first player in the history of cricket to be run out by the third umpire during the Durban Test match. Playing conditions were signed off at the time. Did you think that is going to change cricket, the way a third umpire comes in? And what were your thoughts or the team's thoughts when that was brought into play there?
Well, we didn't actually realize the implications. So as you said, when we reached there and we had to work in the playing conditions, there were some proposals from the South African side, which were different from the usual playing conditions. Normally the playing conditions, would say, what time the play would start, whether it's 9:15 or 9:30 or 11, as happens in England. Over rate, are there going to be fines if there's slow over rate? Things like this, substitutes, etc. This is a routine, but they had something new to put on the table. One was about this television to decide line calls, and we were told this has been trialed in domestic cricket, and it's worked. And we actually had no reason to object. So we agreed. Saying, kya farak padta hai? Ye hua hai, or if it helps the umpires to decide, appeal, why not? Obviously, we didn't realize that, what's going to happen in Durban with such and etc. at that time. The other proposal, as you mentioned, was to have three umpires to stand two at a time, one takes rest, so that they take turns and nobody gets fatigued, and you have, sort of fresh, more alert umpires through the day. And the workload is distributed among three instead of two. This Ravi objected to, I think, in a very valid manner, that umpiring needs consistency when it comes to no balls, wides, etc. And we don't want different people interpreting the law differently during different sessions. So we didn't agree to that. But we had no reason to object to television. And I think that's been a game-changing moment as far as cricket is concerned. It started with Durban, immediately with Sachin being declared out. And while we were watching, we thought he was in. To the naked eye, he looked in. But the television cameras found him short. So that was the first. But the series and the Durban test had other firsts also. We had, I think, Jimmy Cook out dismissed first ball of the game. And we also had Amrit making 100 on debut. So lots of things happened at Durban. And actually, the Indian team was surprised at how strong the South African cricket, not only the test team, but the domestic cricket, their infrastructure, their entire setup was very advanced. You didn't get an idea that they'd been out of cricket for 20 years. The players were hungry. The administration was, on the ball. They had floodlit stadiums, the domestic cricket, etc., and their sports science and support staff backup was very strong. So in every way, they were a modern, professional, committed, determined side, which was surprising because they were out of cricket for such a long time.
Oh, yes. And, talking about the fact that they had a lot of those rebel tours, right, in the 80s, and which possibly kept that cricket going. And even their domestic, I think Curry Cup used to be a really strong system. So did you hear a lot of stories while you were there about those years?
Not really, but I saw them, firsthand about how professional they were, and also how progressive and forward-thinking everything was. To give an example, Cronier was on the fringes of the team. He, I don't think he played a test match, but he was in the squad. He played some of the one-day games. But they'd already identified him as the next captain. In their scheme of things, he would be the future leader. So they were grooming him. I thought that was, very unique in terms of a youngster who's not even playing test cricket, and you're clear that he's going to be my next captain. Similarly, their fitness standards were very high. And I saw them work out. I saw them train. I remember there was some game where I think Anil Donald wasn't playing. It was a 3-day game. He wasn't playing. But he would be at the ground in the morning before play started, training. He would sit at the ground all day, and when play ended, he would be back there training again.
Wow.
And this is when he should be taking rest. He was supposed to be taking rest for that game. But still, that kind of commitment to come to the ground in the morning, train, spend the whole day waiting, train again in the evening. So I thought that level of commitment and acceptance that you need to be as fit as this to be able to play successfully at the top level was already a part of South African cricket. And we found it a bit, ahead of us in terms of how we were playing our cricket at that time.
And I think you also had an interesting conversation with Dr. Ali Baka, and this is a quote that I wanted to ask you about. He said that for a sports team to do well, there are three things that are needed. One is obviously goodwill of the public. Administrators need to get that goodwill of the public. I think then, you get the funds, and I seem to forget the third thing. Then he says India has all three. Can you just fill me in on that?
He said you need talent to come into the game.
Yeah.
You need money.
Yeah.
And you need goodwill support of the entire ecosystem of the sport.
Yeah.
And he said this is the job of the administrator to get all these three things. And in India, you have surplus of all this. Every kid is playing cricket. There's no shortage whatsoever of money. And there is all the support that you need present. So why is India not the number one team in the world? But listen, again, congratulations that you've read the book, so and you can because. But that's something which has remained with me for a long time. That this is a fact. These are the only three things the administrator needs to do: attract talent, find money for your sport, and have general goodwill around support. So whatever the sport may need, you can sort of access that. And this again shows how clear thinking and smart Ali was, because he constantly worked on this. And what struck me then was also not only his meticulous way of functioning, but his respect for sponsors. Because unlike India, it's difficult to attract money into cricket in other countries, especially in South Africa at that time, the economy was not really great and things. But the respect and the partnership, the whole model of partnership which he made for a sponsor is concerned was amazing. He treated them well, gave them whatever mileage he could, and really respected the relationship as equals. So that also gave me an insight into administration, that it's not just your sport, but how you manage the other stakeholders around you, which will make your sport more powerful and more engaging.
Now, India obviously had a tough tour to South Africa, but there were few good moments. You already mentioned Praveen Amre getting the 100 on debut at Durban. Then you had Kapil Dev getting a brilliant 100 at Port Elizabeth when it was doldrums at the other end. Sachin Tendulkar got a century at Johannesburg. Anil Kumble got a few wickets. W.V. Raman became the first Indian to get an ODI 100 as well on that tour. These were some of the highlights. How do you look at it from a cricketing perspective? Because India, as we speak now, have not yet won a test series in South Africa. They've come close on a couple of occasions. It's a tough tour.
Listen, you're right. We haven't won in the last 33 years, whatever the time has passed since our first trip. And at that time, the South Africans were the superior team, whether it's the test or the one days. So the bright spots from the Indian perspective were few. And in fact, there was disappointment that India has not been able to perform better than what they did. And you picked the right moments, whether it's Praveen's 100, Sachin's 100, and the emergence of Srinath and Kumble. It was very clear that they're going to be, responsible for the main bowlers for India for a very long time. And Kapil's 100 was absolutely incredible. We were, I think, 27 for 5, 31 for 6, with Schultz and the other bowlers releasing rockets. And he made 129 out of 215. And I think it's almost on par with the 175 he made in the World Cup against Zimbabwe. But that led to India winning the World Cup, so it's got more attention. But it was a savage innings and phenomenal in terms of audacity, in terms of stroke play, in terms of domination. Because his 129, I think next highest score was 20 or something. And the circumstances, you're 6 down 31 in a test match. You're done, you're gone. But to play like that, and so there, and you mentioned Raman's 100. So these were bright sparks. But ultimately, I think we were the second best team on the tour. They were far superior.
Oh, yes. And again, there was an incident on the field of play which, sort of soured things. It was the friendship series, but it was Kapil Dev running out Peter Kirsten at the non-strikers end. Now, I'm not going to use the word that's generally people describe, because I don't think we should sully the name of an Indian legend in using that term. But running out at the non-strikers end after fair warning, and then tempers were flaring up off the field. You're a young manager with these stalwarts of the game. How difficult was it to handle that situation?
Listen, running out the non-striker when he's trying to seek an unfair advantage, I think is totally right.
I agree. Yes.
Totally right. So it's totally right. You look at it anyway, it's right.
Yes.
It is an unfair advantage. So the bowler has the right to dismiss him. And it's also within the rules. The rules support this. So I don't see anything wrong in what happened there. And he had been given fair warning also, which need not be done. So I think Kapil is entirely correct in what he did. This led to a follow-up incident where Vessels sort of hit Kapil with a bat while taking a run in another game. Now, that is incorrect. That is physical. That is completely outside the laws and wrong looking at it from whatever angle. So Kapil, when he came back into the dressing room, I think around whatever, during break or something, mentioned that it was deliberate and he janbooj ke kiya. So the team decided that we should lodge a complaint with the referee and he has to take action as per the guidelines of the ICC and thing. So the inquiry was held. We put our point of view forward. Vessel denied it, saying it was, in normal play. I was running and I was taking, turning. So accidentally, it happens that a batsman, collides or with a fielder or a bowler, which did not look right to us. So it is the word of one person against the other. And the key to all this was the television footage, which could have demonstrated whether it was deliberate or, unintentional and accidental. Strangely, the South African Cricket Board and the South African broadcaster, the SABC, said that they can't produce that footage, key evidence, because of a technical glitch and that's got deleted. Now think about it. This is, you have 6-7 hours of play and you can't find those 30 seconds, just those 30 seconds to decide this inquiry, saying that there's a technical glitch and for some reason that's got deleted. So that also didn't convince anybody. But for want of this evidence, I think Clive Lloyd, the referee, was unable to, take a final call. And he just let it be with a warning that, the usual thing, play the game in the spirit. And I think Wessels got away. The whole world knew who was right, who was wrong. And it's just one of those things where maybe for whatever reason, they didn't want a controversy where their captain was being punished for something which is completely ungentlemanly and non-cricket thing. So whatever may have been the reason, but I think Wessels got away free.
We've looked back at that tour. It was historic now that India are in South Africa. But I would also like to ask you a couple of questions on your entire journey, because we get a lot of people writing to us asking for advice on joining the sports industry. Today, it's very different. 30 years down the line, it's a proper industry thanks to the IPL. Thanks to the IPL, it gave a fillip to the Indian sport industry. Other leagues emerged. Other sports have picked up. You've had a complete view of the sports industry. Even, when the IPL was formed, you worked with the Delhi Daredevils, as the Delhi Capitals was known then, getting sponsors, all these things. So can you tell us a little bit about that? How you seamlessly moved from one profile to the other, because it kept changing you and it kept challenging you and you kept evolving. How important is that evolution for someone who wants to join the industry?
Oh, well, fine. But can I just go back to something about the 92 South African tour before I...
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I was a manager and an inexperienced manager, but I was okay by the end of it. And I realized a few things. That, as I said, he's the head of the delegation, so he has an added responsibility of representing BCCI, India, team, whatever. One of the perks of being manager is that simple thing, like in a hotel, you would get a suite. Yeah. Only the captain and the manager get a suite, not a jeep. So that was a bit embarrassing for me. At times, I would offer it to him because his family was around. So, I don't need a suite. And he's a jeep party career. So that was one, a bit of embarrassment. Another reason for embarrassment was at the end of the tour, I'm supposed to write a report on the tour and the players and all that's happened, which means I got to write about Azhar and Kapil, Ravi, about the discipline, performance, commitment, hard work. So I found it strange. Who am I to write a report on Kapil Dev? Whether he's committed, disciplined, whether his performance was good, what is he as a team member? So anyway, I was a bit embarrassed and a bit uncertain about what to do, but I wrote some rubbish. Aisa kuch likh diya. But, it needn't have worried me because I realized later that nobody reads this report. It get filed. And when I was on the board, I also saw other reports which had come to the office, and nobody even spent 5 minutes on it. So it shouldn't have bothered me to write a report, post tour report. So coming back to the question you asked about evolving and doing multiple different roles. Well, now it's a totally different scene. When 92 leading up to whatever 2000, early 2000, the game was evolving, there was commerce coming in, but it was gradual. The trigger for a major change was IPL, where cricket, from being a sport, also became a huge commercial venture. So IPL is cricket and IPL is commerce in equal measures. So as the CEO, the Chief Operating Officer, you're responsible for cricket results, you're responsible for the balance sheet. So you got two separate, set of activities. While your team must do well, you must have the cricket support staff, coaches, practice, training, spotting, scouting, auction on one side. You also need sponsors, money, ticket revenue, other sources of generating income, because it's a huge investment made by the teams, and you expect a business to be run successfully and deliver profits. So you got to do both things. The advantage I had, and some others at that time when IPL started in 2008, was we'd already been in cricket. So we knew at least the cricket side very well. We knew how the board functioned. We know how matches have to be organized. We knew what players need. So we were pretty solid in terms of that side. And if you had some, ability of being connected, you managed the commercial side also. But now it's entirely different. Now, compared to 2008, many people have gained that experience. In 2008, there were only few like me who were in cricket and who were capable of handling the commercial side also. But now it's very clear that you need top professionals separately, the cricket side and the non-cricket side, to run an IPL team. But many have gained experience over 15, 16 years. But we should not forget that IPL is cricket commerce. And it's a high-stake game. Lots of money is involved. And it's an evolving thing. That while the cricket remains by and large the same, the format, structure, etc., not much hasn't changed much. But the other side keeps evolving very, very quickly. Just look at the number of sponsors and the type of sponsors who associate with the IPL. Every 2 years, the set of sponsors are entirely different. You could have telecom companies one year, you could have soft drinks other side, you could have education companies, you could have fantasy sport partners. So that reflects what's going on around you in the economy. So you have to be alert to those trends, and you have to manage the commercial side nowadays. And what two new things have happened actually. One is the cricket has become entirely data driven. When IPL started, the data guy was sitting in a corner and maybe offering some advice which the coach would reject or the captain would reject. Now team meetings are driven by the data guy. So there is a coach, and the coach's main partner is the data person. So cricket strategy, picking players, how you're going to approach a game, how you're going to manage your fielding positions, your batting order, your bowling changes, is considerably decided by the data guy. So that's something new which has come recently. The other side is that content is important. The teams want to create content which the fans want to consume. So earlier you were spending money to create content and keep in touch with your fans and build a fan base. Now that content is precious, it gives you money, it's a source of revenue, and there's a huge demand to consume that content. So I think as you go forward, the data will become more and more important, and the content will become more and more precious. So now the teams have a separate data team, the franchises, they have a separate content team.
Yes.
So I think that's a major change in the last 15 years. Otherwise, the cricket is the same. When you watch a match, the operations, the security, the selling of tickets, the mechanics of organizing the game are the same. But I think in the background, data is important, and this need to be connected with fans and to grow your fan base through data and through content is a lesson everybody's learned.
One of the things or one of the advice that you gave me, when I had the pleasure of working with you, and this has stayed with me, you told me always look at the grassroots. कि कौन सा खिलाड़ी आ रहा है, कौन खेलने वाला है, who's going to do well. And in that project that I was a part of, one of the players who has gone on to make it big. And the other day I was surfing, it's Ruturaj Gaikwad, and we had written about him back when he was 18 and had just scored a double hundred in under 19 cricket. So that advice really helped someone like me, at that time. Now, obviously, 8 years down the line, 8 or 9 years down the line, sports industry has changed. If you have to give one advice to, say, these young professionals who are getting into the industry, what would that be?
I think it depends because see, the industry has so many facets and so many layers. So you have to focus on one particular aspect of the industry. Is it data? Is it spotting talent? Is it towards the content side? Is it towards the marketing side? Is it through sponsor relationships? Is it through just match operations? So you have to pick a certain activity and learn about it and get experience. So it's not, I think those days of all-rounders like me are over. That was a different, phase of the IPL and of the cricket industry. You still need a leader in a team or in an organization. But I think specialization, like in every other field, is important. So if you're a youngster wanting to be in sport, into cricket, etc., I think you have to choose one of the things that you want to do, which sort of interests you, and follow that up. The point about grassroots actually is very valid. It was valid then, it's valid now. Because see, as a normal person, when you're watching cricket, we are watching actually the top 30, 40 Indian cricketers, whether they play Test cricket, ODIs, T20s. During the IPL, we watch a certain number or more. Because ultimately, there are 17 Indians in every team, max into 10, 170 guys are in the IPL. Out of those 170, at least 40 to 50 don't play a game. So at best, you are watching 100 Indian cricketers in the IPL or in all international cricket through television. But there are thousands and thousands of cricketers playing cricket. We have 38 national teams, which is more than the teams. We have 38 first-class teams, which is more than the first-class teams put together in England, Australia, and South Africa. So also we have under 14, 16, 19, 23 Ranji, and similarly for women. So the amount of cricketers and amount of cricket that India has is perhaps more than the rest of the world put together. So if you want a larger picture and understanding of Indian cricket, you need to go beyond those 100, 150 cricketers. Watch Ranji Trophy, watch under 19 cricket. So not only will you see new exciting talent, it'll also educate you. When you go to the ground, you see so many things which you cannot see on television. Television will only show you, you will only see what television shows you. But when you're on the ground, you watch a cricketer, you watch the way a bowler is bowling, you watch the way a batsman is going into bat, how he marks his crease, how he approaches a new ball. So I think it's a great education to be able to watch domestic cricket, watch new players. You learn so many more things. So that knowledge will strengthen you in whatever you want to do. Go to a ground, watch Ranji Trophy over a day. You realize match organized kaise hota hai, player kaise khel rahe, what all is surrounding cricket. So I think that's important, and I think that's something which is missing now. We all consume cricket only through television and not actually by going to the ground. Or we go to a ground only for a big event. We'll go to an IPL game, we might go to an international game. So I think that is something we've lost sight of. Ultimately, if you are at the ground watching cricket, watching what is happening, that's education that will help you in whatever you might want to do later on with cricket. Maybe they throw a lamba lecture ho gaya, but I think it's valid.
No, absolutely. And, my final question to you will be a bit about your book, which I've obviously had the pleasure of reading. We discussed one chapter in a lot of detail here, but I must tell the viewers and our listeners that there are many, many other chapters, detailing accounts from the 2003 World Cup, the 2002 tour to England, also your time at the Delhi Daredevils, of course, the 2004 tour to Pakistan, which was also landmark. What was the motive of writing a book like this? Because it's not just a treasure trove of anecdotes, but having read it, I learned a lot from your experiences dealing with so many things.
See, as I said earlier, I was fortunate to be in positions which others have not had the opportunity to, be. I've been present in many historic moments of Indian cricket, whether it is the 1992 tour, whether it's handling and being part of Pilcom, whether it's to watch Sachin Tendulkar being run out at Durban, whether it is to see Saurav Ganguly doing what he did at Lords, which Salman Khan is doing even today, whether it is to watch Sehwag make that triple hundred in Multan, the first IPL. So I think I've just been fortunate to be there. And I had a lot of information which others would not have. And looking at the curiosity which people have about cricket and players and matches and events, people even want to know what kind of toothpaste Virat Kohli uses. So here I am sitting on a lot of information, especially about how a team works on a tour. So when you're on tour, what happens? What happens in a team meeting? What happens pre-team meeting? What happens at dinner in the evening? So where does Sachin sit in a team bus? Who decides who sits where in the dressing room? What happens when the teams are playing TT tournament in the team room, or trying to make putts in the hotel on a wobbly carpet. So there's a lot of information which I thought would be interesting to people and to get an inside account. So I decided to write it. Now, I only written, it's not my story. The book is not my story. The book is also not the story of Indian cricket. It just slices. It's about players, matches, events. Now, there are two things about all this. One, it is first-hand. It's accurate. It's only where I was present and what I saw, not what somebody told me. So it is authentic in that manner. Secondly, a lot of it is personal. I've written some pieces on some administrators, whether it's Lalit Modi, whether it is Raj Singh Dungarpur, whether it's Mr. Sindhya, whether it's Mr. Jaitley, also players, Sachin, Rahul, Mr. Gavaskar, Dravid. Now, I'm not writing about Sachin the player. The whole world is written, and we all know what is there about Sachin. So I can't really add much. So these write-ups about the administrators or the players are also personal. It is based on my interaction with him. I'm not judging Tiger Pataudi as captain or Sachin Tendulkar the player. I'm just writing about my experience with them. So to that extent, it's a personal kind of a book. And as I said, it's first-hand, it's authentic, it's only what I saw myself. So I think some people told me that there's no mention of this, that, or other. I said, it's fine. I wasn't there. So I'm only writing about what I personally experienced. So I was happy writing the book. Now it's up to others to decide whether it's good or it's rubbish.
No, it's definitely a really good book because it has given a real insight. And for someone who's not so well versed with what happens behind the scenes, I think it's a really good initiation into
Let me
that.
give you an example.
Yes.
We all know so much about how a team or what happens with the Indian team, because nowadays there's so much on television, on social media, etc. I didn't know how the fielding team decides which ball to use. Before you go into field, the third umpire comes and drops maybe 12 balls in a box in the dressing room saying, choose and let me know which one you are using. Now, there's a science to choosing that particular ball with which you are going to bowl. So there's a process and there's a science. So I didn't know this. And when I was in the Indian team, I saw this. कि कैसे होता है कि how does the Indian team decide आज किस बॉल से गेंद करनी है. So there are nuggets and there's solid cricket information also in the book. Well, for instance, when you're sitting in a team meeting, the players are discussing strategy and plans for the game tomorrow, whether it's a Pakistan game or any other game. So there'll be a discussion whether fine leg should be fine or square for a particular bowler, for a particular batsman, whether the mid-off should be close or deep, or the short cover should be 10 yards from the batsman or may stay back. So these are serious cricket guys talking serious strategy. So that's an education. So some of the things I've sort of put in the book about how what happens in a team meeting ahead of a game. So I think that interests me a lot as a cricket person and a cricket fan. So I hope some of that will interest the reader also.
Absolutely. And I think it's just some of those anecdotes. Like one of my favorite anecdote is you go to Centurion before the Pakistan game and Sachin Tendulkar points out the direction of the blades of grass and says, "Is taraf ball tez jayega." So
इस
these
तरह
little things.
इस तरह ball जाएगा धीरे जाएगा because the blades are facing the
Ah,
pitch.
yes, yes, yes.
So it'll slow down. As a result, you can take an extra run. So I think that's an incredible insight into the working and the mind of the player. That normally a batsman will factor in bowlers, pitches, conditions, cloud cover, moisture, the usual. Here is a guy looking at the direction of the blade of the grass. Amazing, absolutely.
Oh, yes. And for all these anecdotes and a lot more, I must recommend to our listeners, Pitchside, do grab your copies. And sir, it's been such a pleasure to have you on our show and to talk cricket. I think this is something that I was really looking forward to. And thank you for making time and sharing all your wonderful insights on our show.
A pleasure, really, and really delighted to have being able to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Yes, and to all the listeners of Stumps and Stories, continue to join us on our podcast across all social media platforms. On YouTube, you can watch us on Digital 2 Sports. You can follow me on Instagram at Nishad Pai Vaidya. You can also follow Pod1 at Pod1 on Instagram.